Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuition. So got another classic album inspection here. So this is something I do every few weeks, basically when it's the anniversary of an album coming out. I celebrate it, whether it's its 30th, 35th, 45th, 50th anniversary, and today it's the 35th anniversary of this, Edge of Insanity by Tony Macalpine. Dreadful cover, that's the reissue cover. It's even worse than the original cover, which I did have on vinyl but sold. What's a little bit of history about this album? Why is this a classic album? This is the first full-on shrapnel shred album. It's probably the first full-on heavy metal shred guitar album. Okay, so prior to this, Malmsteen had made the Rising Force album, but that's predominantly instrumental, but it has 2 vocal tracks on it. This is all instrumental, it's all shred, it's completely undiluted. It's 100% full shred. There we go. Tony Macalpine started playing piano at the age of 5. He studied at University of Hartford in Connecticut. He's a piano prodigy. Plays stunning at that. I'm not sure when he started guitar. I imagine he came to it a little later, probably in his 16, maybe 15, 16, 17. And he just got practicing. He actually had a job at a petrol station at night on the night shift. There wouldn't be many customers, so he would just sit there, practice his guitar in the booth, and then take payments, yeah? So I'd imagine he was hammering, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day or something like that, and it shows in his playing. So he's virtually equally as good a keyboard piano player as his guitar player. So that's one of the first ports of call. Probably about 1985 sometime, he sends a demo to Mike Varney in a Guitar Player magazine. Mike Varney's the president of Shrapnel Records, and he puts him in the Guitar Player Spotlight feature column, offers him a deal. And according to records, it says that this album came out on Shrapnel in January of 1986. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, because it didn't come out till later in Europe on the Roadrunner label. So when I release this video, which is probably going to be May or June, obviously I'm actually filming this now in lockdown, it's January, that's when I think it came out in the UK and Europe. I didn't actually buy it until September of 1986. I didn't get around to it for a while, but I'll explain, we'll go through the tracks and I'll talk a bit about it. But the first track, Wheel of Fortune, there it is back at the front. It's 3 minutes and 43. So the first time I heard this track was on the Friday Rock Show. So basically for people of my generation, you go to school, you get home, it's Friday, you practice your guitar, you watch, Blue Peter or whatever, have your tea. 9 o'clock at night, you put on the Friday Rock Show because you can stay up late and you listen to Thomas the Vance, the music vendor, and you check out the new music. There's no Spotify, there's no YouTube. If you want to hear new releases, you're reading the press, you're finding out what's coming out, and you're listening out for tracks on the Friday Rock Show. This is how I discovered TNT, White Line, and it's how I discovered Tony Macalpine. Didn't know a thing about this guy, didn't know a thing about this album. Tommy Vance plays the track. I think he introduced it and said, "I've got this amazing new guitarist, Tony Macalpine," something like that. It fucking blew my mind. I couldn't believe that someone could play guitar like that. I couldn't believe they could play it fast. I couldn't believe guitar could sound like that. Because it was another level. The guitar players I was listening to at that time, were nimble-fingered, but they would typically use hammer-ons and pull-offs to play quick lines and two-handed tapping. This guy was picking every note, or as I later found out in an interview, he did alternate picking, and that's when I realised to get this sound you had to do down and up strokes. Some people are pop economy picked now, but back then, basically your shredders all alternate picked. Or so we thought. We didn't realise Malmsteen was kind of economy picking, sort of. But it sounds like alternate picking. Sorry, going into guitar speak. So this is a great track, this. I had heard shredding prior to this. Obviously, I'd heard Malmsteen on Stars and I'd heard Hiroshima Mon Amour, but I hadn't quite got it yet. Sometimes I don't get things straight away, me. So when I heard Malmsteen, Macalpine, I was kind of primed and ready to get into shred. Took me a while to get the album. Like I said, I didn't buy it until a few months after, and that was after I heard a track called The Taker, which is track 7. It's another great track. So Wheel of Fortune starts with a great drum intro by Steve Smith. So Steve Smith of Journey and latterly top jazz drummer is the drummer on this, and Billy Sheehan, obviously we know him, is on bass. They fucking absolutely own this album. Their performances are equally stunning as Macalpine's. I think they learnt the tracks in a matter of a day. They probably laid down the rhythm tracks and learnt them over the course of 3 days. Then Tony Macalpine probably laid down his lead and his harmonies in 1-2 takes. It was done very quickly, this album. So imagine, Macalpine prepped really hard, and obviously Smith and Sheehan just know what they're doing. So The production, people criticise this Strackmore production. I actually think this album sounds pretty good. It sounds better than Racer X's debut, Street Lethal. It sounds better than the Cacophony's debut. It probably sounds as good as Second Heat. It doesn't sound as good as the second Macalpine album. It's about as good as Vinnie Moore's debut, So it's got clarity. It's a little woofy. But for an independent album, it's pretty good. I think Steve Fanaro, the engineer, used samples for the drums and they work pretty well. Sheehan's bass tone's really cool. It's got a nice bit of distortion on it and it's top. And Tony's guitar tone's pretty cool, a little high end. But so Wheel of Fortune's a straight, shred out track. He's just doing amazing kind of dueling neoclassical lines. In some ways, Mike Varney called this genre neoclassical fusion. And in a sense, Macalpine's more neoclassical than Malmsteen is because he's inspired by Chopin. He plays Chopin etudes on the piano. And Chopin's actually from the classical era of music. Bach and Vivaldi, who principally influenced Malmsteen from the Baroque period. So it's got a slightly different sound to Malmsteen. It's not just like a Malmsteen rip-off. He has some kind of jazzy fusion elements in as well, because he's a big Aldo Meola fan and a big Jean-Luc Ponty fan. I forget who Jean-Luc Ponty's keyboard player is. He copied some arpeggios off that. But it shows off his chops. This is fast alternate picking. And also, so one of Macalpine's trademarks is he uses C-shaped arpeggios. So he'll use arpeggios starting your little finger on the A string like that, and then he will tap the octave or maybe tap the 7th or 9th to get a different note. So this differs from someone like Malmsteen, who typically uses A-shaped arpeggios and A minor-shaped arpeggios. So that gives Macalpine his own sound, his own take on the neoclassical thing. It's different from Vinnie Moore, different from Gilbert's string skipping, different from Jason Becker starting on the low E thing, and so on, and Marty's kind of 3-string arpeggio thing. So that's the thing about all these neoclassical players. They do similar things, but they've all got their own take on it, and I think they all stand out as individuals. So track 2's The Stranger. Great this. So this shows off another Macalpine trademark on the solo, where he'll kind of hold down a note and he'll tap a melody like that. And sometimes he'll move the note, but he's not kind of doing rippling sort of ripples of notes a la Van Halen. It's a great solo. 2 really good tracks to open up. The backings on these are pretty straight ahead. Tony Macalpine, he doesn't do, intricate riffs. He'll just kind of chug power chords, or some of his songs are in kind of 12/8 triplet feel, and he just keeps it straight, and the guitar melodies carry the song, and they're really well composed. Again, that's under 4 minutes. It's a short track. Then it's got Quarter to Midnight live solo. Now the shredding on this is stunning. It's a load of bollocks that it's live. Macalpine probably barely played live at this point. It's got canned screams in the background. So, I used to like solo spots when I was a kid, but I kind of, I'm not that fussed about it now. But you can hear a lot of the techniques. He does really fast arpeggios. He does some cool whammy stuff as well with high harmonics, which, again, that's something that Vinnie Moore, Malmsteen don't do, but Paul Gilbert did at the time. So then he goes on to Agrionia. I'm not sure what Agrionia means. This is a great track. It's a slower, sort of ballady groove. Sheehan and Smith are absolutely on top form on this. The groove's lovely, breaks down in the middle. Sheehan does some beautiful bass stuff, and then the solo's epic. Like when it picks up, Tony just fucking soars. He's here for melodies. He does long central solos on this album, but he really takes them somewhere. They're genuinely musical. It's a great track, 4 minutes 28. Again, it's pretty reasonable length. Then you've got Empire in the Sky. Now this is nearly 6 minutes long, but it's got a piano intro which lasts about a minute. This is really good, a bit more up-tempo. Great drumming by Steve Smith on this. Great intro to the solo on this. Again, he uses the harmonic and pulls up the whammy bar. So again, he's doing something a bit different from his neoclassical contemporaries on this. It's a great track. Got a cool outro solo, again using that kind of tapping and moving stuff. Another thing Macalpine does, but not on this album as much, not I'm aware of, but he does it on other ones. He'll take a shape, a melody, and he'll tap the octave. So, if you had 8, 7, 5 on the high E string, he'd tap 20, 19, 17, and he'd get a kind of octave pattern with 2 hands, So that's another one of his trademarks. So that was the end of side 1. Then side 2 opened with The Witch and the Priest. It's probably the weakest track on the album, I think, this. It's a kind of 12/8 feel again. But it's decent, 3 minutes 32. It's pretty heavy. That's the other thing as well with the album, when he's playing like the full-on shred track, it is metal, it's proper American power metal. Then the next track is The Taker. Now this was the second track I heard on the Friday Rock Show, and this was the one that convinced me to buy the album. I had to order it in. So back in those days I would order in at Area Records in Lancaster, near where I was from, and you know, you'd ring up a week later and say, is my album in the check? And I'd go, yes it is. You'd go along and you'd get it out of your brown paper bag. I think one of my brothers maybe went to Lancaster with my mum and they picked it up for me, and I listened to it that night. So The Taker's a great track. It's 3 minutes 20. He totals some blazing shredding at the end of the solo on this. It breaks down to some stabs, and Tony just lets rip with some of the, at that time, probably some of the fastest alternate picking, you know, this side of Malmsteen and Gilbert that you'd heard. It's a great track. Then he does a Chopin Prelude. It's a Chopin Prelude 16, Opus 28. It's 1 minute 20. You know, this shows his dexterity on the piano. I'm not fussed about these pieces of music, but you know, it's interesting he's showing his roots in true classical music with this. Track 9's one of my all-time favourites of his. It's Edge of Insanity. Again, this has just got an epic solo in the middle, but it's got a really nice sort of kind of proggy sort of melody. Got a pedal tone with the chords in the back on the keyboard, really nice. Then he's got the Raven. This has got a really cool kind of a harpsichord style intro. It's quite baroque. It's pretty fast, this track, pretty ripping. Does some cool whammies, some cool shredding, very good. And the final track on the album is like Agrionia. The fourth track is kind of a slow one called No Place in Time. Again, Billy Sheehan and Steve Smith's groove on this, and Sheehan did some lovely sliding bass stuff. It was absolutely spot on. And then Tony's solo is great. He kind of modulates through key changes and builds. And he does this stunning legato run up, and this was the first time I heard outside playing, apart from Steve Vai's Big Trouble solo. So the first time I heard someone play outside was on Vai's Big Trouble solo, which was using tapping, but basically Vai kind of plays a counter line really outside with his tap notes and then or switches with this hand. I can't play it, some players can pull it off. With this though, Macalpine does run up some left-hand legato, and he kind of rolls in some chromatic notes, obviously inspired by Alan Holdsworth, and he pulls it off really good, and a lot of players in metal can do the sort of fusion style runs that great to me. But that was the first time I'd really heard something like that. He does some lovely whammy bar slurring, again inspired by Holdsworth, and it's a brilliant playing on this lovely track, and it's got a lovely fade-out solo. And there is some good fade-out lead on this album. So I think the thing with this album is it didn't outstay its welcome. Too many instrumental albums last long. An instrumental album, you know, not many of the tracks should be over 4 minutes. On this, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 tracks are over 4 minutes, and only one of them is over 5 minutes. The rest of them are all under 4. They get the point out there. The riffing's kind of simple, and it lets the melodies breathe. And I think that's why this record holds up. It's, you know, it's not as good as his next record. When it's the anniversary of that next year, I'll look at that, and that is the greatest instrumental shred album for me. But this is a really good starting place. It's easy an 8 out of 10. It's a great example of the shrapnel genre of instrumental albums. I think along with Mind's Eye by Vinnie Moore, I think this album and Mind's Eye kind of stand out, and a lot of people have Perpetual Burn, the Jason Becker one. Those are great examples of it. Also, the Michael Lee Firkins one was another top one. Less shreddy though. But it's still an album I go back to, listening to it fresh today. You know, I can see why it made an impact on my life. It's well worth checking out. And it really put Shrapnel on the map from 86 through till 1990 as the home of shred. After that, it kind of died off. And now everyone goes on YouTube for stuff like this. But back then, if you wanted to hear shred, you bought Shrapnel albums. If you wanted to see shred, you had to buy instructional videos by the likes of Vinnie Moore and Tony Macalpine. I've never actually seen his instructional video, Paul Gilbert and so on. It's nothing like it was today. So I hope you enjoyed that. That is Tony Macalpine's Edge of Insanity, 35 years old today. Awesome. Cheers, thanks so much.